Hey everybody, on this episode, episode 6, season 2, now that's a great story, The Process, Sonya and I talk about how to have a full-time job while you're doing research on the side for your own book, while you're writing that book or that novel. It can be done. It can be done. There is a way. There is also a way to stay in touch with me. That's through paulkicksnewsletter.com, like that little segue. Above all, one of the things we share is how to steal time out of your workday so that you can do the sort of research you need for your own life. There's a way to do that too. It's not exactly unethical. It's just a matter of taking a little time for yourself. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I look at it. That's the way a lot of people look at it. Don't look at me that way. Look, I was a good, productive employee when I was an employee for a multimedia and multinational corporation. Episode 6, season 2. Now that's a great story. The Process. So Sonya, today we're going to talk about something that I've gotten probably like the most amount of questions about in the last 5 years, which
your
is
beard.
Yes. Now actually it's second to the beard.
Second to your beard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Depends on when you see me, because in the author's photo, I'm beardless.
Yes. But now you have a beard.
And it appears on the website, so some people are confused. So that's question number
it's your
one.
Twin. Do you have a twin?
Yes. Do you have a twin? Is it an evil twin? Are you the evil twin?
Yes.
But that's actually not what we are going.
What is the question then?
The question is, I want to write a book, but how do I write a book, be it a novel or a nonfiction book, while still holding the full-time job?
You get that question?
I do.
Like that?
No, they actually phrase it
Differently.
and probably better.
Yeah.
Probably fair to say better.
Maybe.
All right.
But it's a good question.
It's a fantastic question, because the reality is, this is something that I get in a fair number of emails. I would love to do a book, but I just don't have the time. Or I started to do a book, but then I had to abandon it because I took a new job and the job took up too much time or whatever. Look, I get it. Like, time is a real thing. Time constraint is a real thing. But there is a way to make it work.
Have an amazing wife.
You've got to have an amazing partner.
That's it. That's the answer.
Yes, that's the end of the episode. Let's stop right there.
That's it.
But you also have to have, I actually think that you can do it without an amazing partner.
No,
I think you can do it on your own a little bit, don't you? Like, because, anyway, let's get into it.
Okay.
Okay, so how does one hold down a full-time job and still find time to do the research and whatnot that they had to do? All right. The first thing to understand actually has nothing to do with your schedule. It has to do with your body. Are you ready? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that you have to understand your circadian rhythm. Yes.
Okay.
And you need to understand the time of day when you are best to do certain tasks. Okay? So
But that took you a while to figure out.
Oh God, yeah. So let's just talk about circadian rhythms. And for a long time I used to write, even before I met you, I used to stay at the college magazine I edited until like 2 a.m. And then in my early 20s, I was like, well, I'm going to work all hours of the day. I'm just going to like exhaust myself, because that's what the American ideal is, right? That's actually the terrible way to do it. So the first thing to understand is, when are you at your most creative, and then work only in that time of day to do that creative work. For me, I'm a morning person. So if you want to start your novel, right, and you don't know when to do it, if you want to begin the book research but don't know when to do it, could I gently suggest...
What?
If you're great early in the morning, then just write early in the morning. If you need to get some like hardcore research done, do it early in the morning.
How early?
Well, so like I'm a very early morning person. So like I did it, started with the Saboteur. I started my day somewhere between like 4:30 and 5.
Yes, but you also had small children.
Yes, and
who
I had to
sometimes started their day
at like 6
or earlier.
And so it's a constant. This is the thing. It's a constant. You're right to bring this up, because immediately some people will say, well, I have small kids. And I'll be like, I get it. I had them as well. That doesn't mean that there still isn't a time of day in which you can do this. I mean, I don't want to take such a hard line, hard ass stance, but like the truth is, if you make the time for it,
Well, I'm going to say then that it's two parts. You have to, if you have a family, if you have a partner that works, or you have to enter into a partnership with that person that will allow you the flexibility to either be that morning person or that evening person. In our case, it was very much you being able to write early in the morning and me getting up with the kids and taking over that responsibility so you could have the freedom to write.
yes, I would say that you need to find some sort of agreement with your partner if you are married, if you are in a sort of long-standing relationship, find that relationship with the partner.
Who is a saint.
More to often than not, yes. Certainly in your case. Were you go ahead?
Wholeheartedly agree with
I
that.
honestly don't know why Rome hasn't already approved the saintdom.
Beatified me?
Yeah,
It's
just
coming. It's coming.
Okay. I think that so why don't you tell the story about do you remember right when we were like, hey, let's start to dedicate some real time to the saboteur? Because I think it's important for listeners to understand okay, how did we do that? I guess what I'm trying to do is, do you remember the time when I was doing some freelance writing, but then that freelance writing was taking up too much time and I couldn't dedicate myself to researching the book? Do you remember the conversation we had? Because I remember this vividly.
No.
All right. Well, see, this is one of the differences in what we choose to remember or forget. So there was a time where we were in the living room and I was doing freelance pieces, and these freelance magazine and newspaper pieces were taking me away from the research that I could have done to start the research, to start the proposal.
I remember telling you to stop.
Yes, that's the one. And you were like, and I was like, I've got to do this because frankly, we had a young family and we needed the additional cash. And then you said to me, let's focus on this. You want to write this book. Let's focus on this proposal. Does any of this ring a bell?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Is that how you remembered it too?
Yes, but I was very tired, I'm sure, when we had this conversation because our kids were very young. But yes, I told you. I remember that. I also remember at the time when you were writing the book, your schedule at the magazine where
At
you
ESPN, the
worked
magazine, yeah.
was really crazy. You would have those close weeks where you would sometimes come home at 2 a.m. and it was, you'd come home, you'd be exhausted, you try and find time to write in the morning, and then it was just a really difficult cycle for us to be in. And so adding on the freelance pieces to that was just too much.
And I would also say, even when the times when I started to do the book research and I was in those exhaustive schedules, what I would try to do the next day is give myself a little bit of break, right? So when I was researching just for the proposal, I would say, okay, I'm going to get up between 4:30 and 5. Again, because I'm a morning person. If you're an evening person, then your schedule would be the exact opposite. But just to stay on the idea of circadian rhythms for a minute more, I'd get up between 4:30 or 5 and I would work somewhere until 7:30 or 8. On the mornings where I was exhausted from the night before, I would maybe get up at 6:30 or 7 and just try to do an hour's worth of research.
Yes, but I also want to interject here that when you were getting up to work, your children were sometimes up or had been crying or were exhausted. And I was exhausted. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of conversations about if you are going to do this project, you have to go all in because this is very, very hard for me. And if I'm going to do this, and I want you to be able to focus. And so a lot of, you really, really have to have that conversation up front before anything starts, because without a partner to support you, if you have kids or whatever, it can't be done.
No, it can't. And I would say so last time we discussed the idea of teamwork and how no book is written in isolation. And it was largely about all the other people who've helped us, with both of these books now. But in actuality, there is one team captain who is not you, the author, and that is
me.
And that is Sonya. So Sonya's going to go ahead. This is our special limited time offer. Sonya's going to go ahead and make herself available to any of our listeners who need her help. And then we will just, for a very decent, very, very accommodating hourly rate, she will...
No, I would do it for free.
Yes. All right. So that's like, I hope you get that that's basically the idea of the circadian rhythm, right? Like you have to find the time when you're at your best to do some of this work and do that work in that time. Literally block it off in your calendar every day, right? Okay, well, what if some people say, well, I'm at my best in the middle of the day or something like that? Okay, well, let me tell you a story. There's a guy I like. His name is Stephen Cole. Steve Cole has written a few best-selling books. He was also for a very long time the managing editor at the Washington Post. When he was the managing editor at the Washington Post, he had, of course, a very demanding job. And he wrote a book called Ghost Soldiers. And I've heard from some friends of mine at the Washington Post who said, I was like, how the hell did Steve Cole write this book, which was all about like CIA work leading up to 9/11, while he held a full-time job? And the answer was...
He did it at work.
He did. Bum, bum, ba.
Which is also
possible.
what you did.
A little bit. And we're going to get into that. Now that I'm no longer at ESPN, I can be a little bit... And I don't think I'm ragging on Steve Cole because this is actually like to help his process. He would do interviews like during the noon hour. And like do 2 or 3.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah. And there was a friend of mine who went from the Washington Post to ESPN, and early on in my book research, I was like, how did Steve Cole do it? And when my friend told me that, I was like, oh, well, that's how I'm going to do it. So I would sometimes shorten my work lunch, and I would do like, if I needed to reach out to somebody in Europe for the Saboteur, I would do that. Right?
Right.
And I would do it like, if I could squeeze in another email or something at the end of my day, I would send that email then.
Yeah, and maybe during the day.
Maybe during the day.
If you weren't quite as busy.
If I wasn't quite as busy. Again, I got laid off in November of 2020, so let's come clean about what happened at ESPN now, shall we?
It was, I think you have to. You can't just...
You have to.
You have to figure out how to work that into your.
You have to bake it in.
Yeah.
You have to think about. Yeah. You have to think constantly about. Okay. Can I steal 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here? If I can do that, is there an email I can send? Is there a quick phone call I can make? Is there some research I can do?
What I want to talk about is, so then you're under quarantine and you're working on your second proposal.
Yeah.
So you have all the time in the world.
In theory.
In theory.
Not in practice. So here's the crazy thing about right now.
What?
People, I should have more time now that I'm no longer at ESPN and with that full-time job, right?
Yeah.
But what happens instead is, now that we're on our own, now that we're entrepreneurs, now that we don't just have the book, we've got this, we've got like the salon, we've got like 3 or 4 other projects.
And kids.
And kids. And each other. Because we're together and we love each other.
Always.
And we make time for each other every single day.
Every day.
Every day. You got to do that.
Every day.
It's important.
So important.
Because of all that, I'm actually busier now than I was at ESPN. And so like the Birmingham book, finding time to research that, the one benefit I have now, and let me say, it's hard. Let me say that first. It's hard to find that time. But the one benefit I have now is that my schedule is completely mine. So what I mean by that is I still listen to that circadian rhythm. And for me, I am at my most creative early in the morning. So I write early in the morning, right? I'm writing tons of different stuff. We don't need to belabor it here. But there's like 3 or 4 different projects that I'm always writing. I need to edit for another project that I'm working on, another book. A book that I'm helping with. And so every day now I need to think, okay, when is that hour of the day when my mind no longer wants to write? And for me, that's somewhere between like noon and 1. And then after that, I start to find the time, okay, I need like an hour or two to just read and do some book research, and that's in the afternoon. That's the one great thing about having your own schedule. You literally get to make your own schedule. Nobody gets to tell me now, I have to do this or I have to do that.
But I still think it was a challenge for you in the
Good
beginning.
God, yes.
It was really difficult because you're not used to having, I mean, even before, you left ESPN, you still had.
I didn't leave.
Okay, well, I mean, if you want to put it like that, like if you want to, put the nail so tightly, okay. But what I'm saying is that whatever your issues are aside, the truth is that you had to, when you were sent home and you weren't allowed to go to the office, you didn't have that regular schedule of being expected to go to meetings or having to, talk to writers or not on the kind of, hourly schedule that I think you had at work. And so coming home and then having to adjust to that and finding that rhythm and also being in the house all the time, which is incredibly difficult for you on some days, and especially in the beginning, just learning your rhythm of having to be in this house and be under quarantine. And then I think having to learn your schedule because after you left ESPN, you were like, okay, we're going to do all these different things. And I'm like, wait a second, the book still has to be your priority.
And it is, undoubtedly.
Yes. And there are but you have other projects now that I think are as important as the work that you're doing. And so how do you effectively split your time between the book and your family and other projects that you're working on?
It's so right. And there's like a point. This comes from Tim Ferriss, the best-selling author and sort of lifestyle guru. And he is, I think, quoting somebody else who works in Silicon Valley. But basically the idea is make before you manage. And what he means by that is if you are a creative type and if you are a morning person who's a creative type, do the work to make the stuff in the morning. And then in the afternoon, manage the rest of the stuff that you have to manage. Make before you manage has become like my mantra. So in the morning, I make, and then literally at no later than 12:30, my creative brain just starts to wane. And then the rest of the day becomes, all right, how do I manage the stuff that I've launched? That's more on the business end. And the research for the Birmingham book falls within that. And so every day it's like, okay, how can I advance? And I mean that every single day. It's like, how can I advance this? How can I advance the research that I've done? What else do I need to read? Who else do I need to call? Which archives do I need to email? Every single day. You don't need necessarily a huge leave of absence, though I would of course welcome that. You can just literally peck at it every single day and progress will be made that way.
It's not going to be fast progress, though.
No.
I think a lot of people, well, I don't know. I would say that some people, I certainly had the expectation that it would probably move faster than it did.
What?
But
the Birmingham
the
one?
research.
Oh, well, we're also in quarantine.
I know. But what I'm saying is that it's not something, you have to be satisfied with just pecking at it and making small progress every day. If you're looking to make these huge strides every day and every month you're leaps and bounds where you were before, sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes, it's incremental bits and pieces that you move ahead with your work. And I think also, from the first book, I think that also was the biggest lesson, that sometimes, your research can propel you forward. Sometimes it pushes you back. Sometimes it moves you way forward, and sometimes it moves you way back. And so, I always thought it was going to be this linear kind of progression, and we would get there. But that book took years, and this book will take a long time. And I think we are better prepared for it, Yeah, I'm certainly not asking you for a progress report. How are we? Are you done?
No, but because of the first one, I know that in Birmingham, so we signed that in, what was it? July of 2020, somewhere in there. And I began the book research right away. And now that we're in the dead of winter of 2021, right? And it's February and it's awful. I still think that I'm on track to finish my book research by the summer of 2021. And so most book contracts are you get somewhere between a year to 2 years. I asked for 2 years. And then effectively, like in that summer of 2021, that's when I'll start to outline the book, go over some notes, and then start to write so that by the spring of 2022, I can hand in the manuscript.
Yes. So I think if you have a full-time job, and even though you're not with ESPN, I still say, the projects that you're working on are full-time and you're working full-time. I think you have to have realistic expectations of what you can achieve over a day when you are dividing your time and your attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to be okay with that. And I think with the very first book, that was a challenge.
Yeah, it was much more like, let's...
Not for me.
Well, in your infinite wisdom. It's also, since you're approaching sainthood, right?
Yes. So I know these things.
All right. But it's also like, it's the old line, marathon, not a sprint. In the first book, I was like, well, we have to sprint ahead here so I can stay ahead on this other stuff. It's just not true. You just have to every day, like for me at least, and I think for anybody who wants to try to hold a full-time job while doing this, marathon, peck. Make before you manage, right? Like anything you can to make that schedule wholly your own, do it. Sometimes at ESPN, I would put a meeting on my calendar. That wasn't a meeting at all.
Get out of here.
I would do it. And
I didn't know you could do that.
Well, what I would do was if I needed like a half an hour that I wasn't able to make up in the morning, I would say meeting. It would block off that half hour, and I would go somewhere on campus and I would read one of the books I was researching or call somebody or something.
You wouldn't call me?
I would have a separate
meeting. You would have a separate meeting?
Yes. Set aside on that, and I would say, call Sonya.
Okay.
You don't remember that? It happened a lot. See, this is like that other pivotal moment that you don't seem to recall that set off the saboteur.
That's weird. I don't
it's
recall
weird.
that at all.
It's weird how that
Setting
doesn't.
aside meetings every day.
I think that's good. Let's discuss for a second who produces the second season of Now That's a Great Story.
The really brilliant Jeffrey Willett.
He does.
He does such a good job.
Okay, and then let's talk about who makes the music for Now That's a Great Story.
Jeffrey Willett.
Same guy.
Same brilliant young man.
Same brilliant young man. We plucked him. He's a good guy. All right.
Amazing guy.
That's it. We'll be back next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like this season of Now That's a Great Story, or just getting caught up on the first, the best way to keep in touch is through the newsletter, paulkicksnewsletter.com. There, you'll get even more advice on how to be the best writer and storyteller you can be. In fact, right now, I've got a free PDF for you. The 7 rules top long-form writers follow to make more money from their stories. Sign up for the newsletter and you'll get the free PDF. Head there now, paulkicksnewsletter.com.